The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. This is Cassie Stumo. I am the marketing specialist here at EAC. Thank you for joining us today for another one of our 15-minute webinar series on Windchill tips. We'll start off today with an introduction of EAC, and then our technical account manager, Todd Liebenow, will give us a short presentation on how to import and export Excel data in Windchill for BOM management. There will be a short survey that will appear once the webinar is over, so stick around for a few minutes after Todd's demo. Everyone will get a recording of the session pending any technical difficulties. Also, please feel free to ask questions along the way and we'll answer them after the presentation. So first off, I will tell you a little bit about who we are. At EAC, our mission is to transform the way companies design, manufacture, connect to, and service their products. We are not only a value-added reseller for PTC, but we are the #1 solutions provider for PTC in the country, with experts in 22 areas of product development. We're located all over the U.S. with our headquarters moving actually from Burnsville, Minnesota to Minneapolis. We offer our customers everything they need for product development, from CAD and simulation software for the full product design process with Creo and ANSYS, software for managing service documentation such as ArborText, Vuforia Studio, and Creo Illustrate, and software for managing product data such as Windchill, which you'll see today. We have ThingWorx, Navigate, and our EAC productivity apps. We assist with design and engineering projects and offer webinars and PTC certified training courses for continuous learning. We also implement the industrial Internet of Things and augmented reality into business strategies to jumpstart initiatives around digital transformation and connecting all things in your company. One more thing that we do is we are a commercial reseller for Formlabs, offering a series of the Form 3 desktop SLA 3D printers at packages starting as low as $34.99. So really, EAC is just the company you need to partner with to get all of the technology you need at the forefront to make your team successful, so that you can continue to do the things that you do best. I'll go ahead and hand things over to Todd so he can get started.
All right, good morning, everyone. Quick audio check, visual check, still looking at my screen. Got me on audio, Cassie?
Yep, I gotcha.
All right, cool. So today's discussion, we're going to talk about creation of parts inside Windchill. So specifically what we're talking about is creating new parts, creating new bill of material structures, and looking at the different options that you've got for doing that. So quick snapshot, how do we do this today inside Windchill? So a couple of different screen grabs here. On the left-hand side, you can go ahead and create a brand new part, using the wizard that'll take you through that process. One thing to note here, it's a little bit of a eye chart, but you'll get the PowerPoint or the video afterwards. The little stars here, asterisks, those are the items that you're going to need to provide the required bits of information. So things like the name, the number, the source, the trace codes, things like that, you're going to have to provide some of that information. Some of it will be optional. What we're looking at on this slide is the individual creation of a part here, or you can create multiple parts, again, using the nice little wizard that's built into Windchill. So sure, you can do it that way, but it's kind of sometimes a tedious process where you're doing one part at a time and then providing information. And then what about creating a new bill of material? Well, again, inside Windchill, there's tools for that. So inside a part structure, you can go ahead and either insert an existing object. You can go search for it and then create that new addition in that BOM structure. Or you can insert multiple new parts, so you get that same sort of wizard window that we looked at just a minute ago. This definitely works, but it's sort of a time-consuming process because you're kind of doing one part at a time, or maybe you could do multiple different parts, but it's still sort of a tedious data entry process. What about using a spreadsheet, right? So what happens if we could use a spreadsheet to fill in some information here using the familiar Excel tool. You could do copy and paste and all those types of things, and auto numbers, and lots of different functionality that you can use there inside Windchill to create structures and parts, and that could potentially save us some time. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Short answer is yes, we can use the spreadsheet for doing these things. And what I'm going to do is just kind of breeze through a few slides here that shows you what that process is, and then I'll show you what that process looks like live inside Windchill. So a quick overview, right? So what I like to do is to start with a spreadsheet template, right? So you go to the location, the context where you're going to bring the new items in, and create sort of a template by exporting this importable spreadsheet. Right, so you go ahead and fire this off, and what you'll do is you'll pick a couple different options here. You'll specify the export options for both parts and bills of material, and then what you do is down here you'll provide a name for the file that you're going to create, and you'll pick the file type. And there's really just a couple of different file types there. It's going to be an older version of Excel formats, the XLS, or the newer one, the XLSX, I believe. So when you select OK, it'll create a file for you there. You have an option to either open that file directly or save it to a location. So that's the general process. And what this is going to do when you pick these two export options, it's going to create a spreadsheet for you with a couple of different tabs. Right, so it's going to have one tab for the WT parts, and then one tab for the bill of material type structure. And sort of a good way to think about this is, or how I approach this is, I save off each one of those tabs as a separate Excel file. It just makes it a little bit easier and cleaner when you're doing the import. So here's a process you can go through. Save 2 copies of your spreadsheet, open the first one, then delete out the BOM sheet 1, and then save it. And then repeat that process in the other spreadsheet, but get rid of the WT part sheet. So what that's going to do then is give you this Excel spreadsheet, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. But that's going to be sort of your guide or your roadmap that you can modify and add your parts and your bill of material structure into that. So what do you do with this spreadsheet? Well, I just clipped this from the help topics from inside Windchill. Some things to keep in mind or things to sort of start with. These imported part structures are going to reference parts that already exist in Windchill. So what happens is if you try and create a bill of material structure with a WT part that doesn't already exist in Windchill, it's going to fail. So the general process is you want to bring in the parts first and then create your bill of material structure off of that. Now, you can do that all in one step, but you do that with one spreadsheet that has both the new parts and the product structure inside of it. So the point there is that you can do that all in one step, but it's a little bit more of a challenge to try and get your spreadsheet tuned up so it has everything correct in both the WT parts and the BOM tab sheets in your worksheet. That's why I suggest breaking that out into 2 separate documents and kind of doing it as a 2-step process. So again, there's some options when you're bringing in the data, and I'll show you where you do this during the import process. And so your options, you can say, I'd like to add and update any items that are already existing in Windchill. So that would be things like iterations or revisions, right? So you can change that while you're doing this import process. You can go ahead and add items only, or if you have items that are checked out, you can update those, or you can choose to only update those items that you're bringing in. Then on the required section, there's going to be some items in your spreadsheet that will be required, right? So I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. But these are going to be column headers. So you need to have an action, a type, a name, and a revision column specified in your spreadsheet so that when you basically are mapping that information back into Windchill, it knows where to find that. We'll go ahead and take a look at this. Here's the spreadsheet. Again, I recognize this is an eye chart in the PowerPoint here, but we'll show this live and you'll get a better picture of what that looks like. So here's your template, and then you go and basically cut and paste and add your parts and modify your BOM structure and those types of things. So again, I don't really have a lot to show you here other than you just go ahead and add your numbers. Here's the type of object that it is, and then you can specify revisions and those types of things. So again, just cut and paste as you need to create your part list or your BOM structure. Then here's where the fun starts. We're going to go ahead and do an import, and you can do this from a couple of different locations. You can go ahead and specify a particular folder where you'd like to bring that information into, or you can go to the top level details page for that product. And again, if you just pick on the actions, you're going to find that there's a drop down there that specifies this import from spreadsheet. And when you click that, you're going to get this. Right, so all you're doing is pointing back to this folder location where you've saved your modified and updated spreadsheet. And here's where you specify those options, right? Do you want to add only, or would you like to add and update those items that you're bringing in? And you want to validate that, right? So what this is basically doing is Windchill is going to scan through your spreadsheet to make sure that all the columns are there and all the information is right. And what I mean by that is you need to match the information from the context. So that's why we start with this template, is to make sure that you have the right revisions and the right sort of nomenclature, the different life cycle dates, and all the things that are specific to that context in that template spreadsheet. Because if those things don't line up, the validation is going to fail and you won't be able to perform the import. So again, bring in the file, go ahead and select the option that you want. You'll validate the spreadsheet. You'll see the green check, everything's good. You'll go to the next step, and then it'll import those items for you. Additionally, at the end, or while this is processing, if you've got a fairly large BOM structure, there's a job monitor that you can go ahead and track what's happening with that particular import process. And so you can go ahead and click on this job monitor, select the item that you're looking at, the last job you submitted, and it'll give you information about the status of that, whether that was successful or if it failed, or if it just validated the item. So that's what it looks like from the overall process standpoint. Let's go ahead and show you what that looks like in real life. So I've already created a spreadsheet, a couple of different ones here. Let's go take a look at this parts folder here, different items that I might have. Let's go here. So again, if I just wanted to export this as a starting point, what I would do would be to say, pick on an item, and I'll just go ahead and export that. Let's go ahead and pick on something here. And I'm going to go ahead and pick on this specific item right here. And what I'll do is say I want to go ahead and export that importable spreadsheet. And you can do this on an individual part or an assembly. But the idea here is you want to create this spreadsheet and use that as your roadmap. So that's what it looks like to create that process. I've got a couple of them here. Here's what it looks like with just that straight exportation of that file. Notice that I've got two different tabs. I've got the WT part sheet and I've got a bill of material sheet. And that's what I was talking about, saving this off as two different files, right? So you can work with this individually. So if we kind of start here at the part and take a look at what's going on, at the very top of this, you're going to find that there's some information here about the type of object that it is. And that's going to match back up to the type of part that we have here in our context. So in this case, this particular installation of Windchill, we just have WT parts. You might have additional granularity on that. It might be mechanical parts or electrical parts, but those are the things that are going to be available for you in the drop down when you create the parts with the wizard. Additionally, you're going to have things like the number, right? That's going to be the item number, the number that Windchill sees that as. You have the name of the item here, specifying whether this is an end item, the trace codes, generic codes. So if you think about what this is doing here, let me drag this over to the side. If I was going to go create a new object, right? So if I pick on a new part, wait for this window to pop up here. Grab this guy. Really what you're doing is you're specifying the items here. So if I say part, these are the different items that I can choose from, whether that's electrical or a manufactured part. And then the other items that are in this window really correspond to the columns in that spreadsheet. So I'm going to have a configuration or configurable item, the organization ID, the name, the number. So all of these different checkboxes or options that you have here in this new part are going to correspond back to the items or the columns in this spreadsheet. So really that's what we're doing here, is just filling out the information in that wizard, but we're doing it in a more automated fashion. Okay, so that's how we build that. I'm going to go ahead, I'll just minimize this for right now. Right, and so if I go back to this folder, go back to my conveyor, and if I want to import some information here, so here's my spreadsheet import. This folder is currently empty, and let's show you what it looks like to import some information into this folder. So from the actions, I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, I would like to import from a spreadsheet. And here's the window. I'm going to specify this as being a local file. I'll go ahead and browse to that. And I've got a WT part import spreadsheet set up and ready to go for that. We'll go ahead and select open. And in this case, I'm going to just say that I'd like to add those items. And if you want, you can specify a name for a baseline. Baseline is just sort of a snapshot of the items as we're bringing them in, and so that becomes a trackable or traceable item inside Windchill. I'm just going to go ahead and validate this at this point. I'm not going to worry about naming a baseline. So my spreadsheet's validated, right? So we're successful in that. I'll go ahead and select finish at this point. And what that's going to do is read in the information from that spreadsheet and bring that into my folder. So I'll just refresh the page, and there's the 14 different items that I brought in from that spreadsheet. All right. So the next thing then is I can go ahead and let's look at the spring assembly, right? So just kind of see what's here. At this point, there's really no structure inside this assembly, right? So what I want to do is go back and grab the information from that other spreadsheet that's, bring that information in. So I'm going to go back to that folder, right? So I don't have the option here inside that object. I just kind of wanted to show you that this is empty here to start with. So I'll bounce back one page, and then I'm going to go and do that import action again, and I'll go back to this spreadsheet. And in this case, I'm going to go grab the bill of material for that new spring assembly. And we'll go ahead and grab this. We'll perform the update on that. Right, so we'll just add these items only. We'll validate that. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to select next. And then this is where it's going to go ahead and create this bill of material comparison for me. And we'll go ahead and do this import. We'll select finish. And now what it's going to do here, if I go back and look at this spring assembly, it's read in that assembly information from that spreadsheet. And I'll show you what that looks like here. But I just kind of wanted to show you that it's read in that information. If I look at the uses tab, it gives me my quantity of the different items here, and it's got this indented sort of structure that's based on the setup inside my spreadsheet. So again, if we look at what we've actually done here, this is the importation of the individual parts. So there's no indented structure here. This is just a collection of parts that I want to add into the Windchill environment. And the other spreadsheet that I have here, this is the bill of material that I brought in. And so you can see here, the type at the top is bill of material. I'm adding this information in, and this level number here in this column is where I specify the indentation or the build level for the different items. And if I scroll a little bit farther to the right here, so here's my design view, and the other thing I wanted to show was the quantity. So here's where I'm specifying the quantities of the different items. So again, if you look at this structure, this is how things are going to be built up in that assembly, and that's how I can go ahead and build in that new part or assembly structure using that import. So that's really the overview of the process. Some other things that I just kind of grabbed that might be helpful. I went to the Windchill help, and you can certainly go ahead and find this inside your installation. But there's some nice little tips and tricks here as far as working with the data. So here's a nice little page as far as the Excel import and export, some best practices. And I've kind of highlighted some things. This is a file format for importing the parts. And so I've got some things here that you want to pay attention to the items that are required. So here's where we talk about the type of object that it's bringing in, the type of action, are we adding or deleting? But there's going to be other items like an end item. That's not a required item, but you can set that to yes and identify that part as an end item. So you want to kind of pay attention to the different options as you're setting them. Here's some information about the add and updates when you're bringing in new items. Again, I mentioned that briefly in the slide, but here's the backing information inside the help topics. And the file format. So this is where you can set up the indented structure or the levels for your bills of material. Different trace codes, and again, the required items, we want to make sure that you're identifying those items as you're setting up your spreadsheet. And then the last one here, some best practices. There's some sample documentation you can download from PTC. That's a good place to start, but again, I think it's probably a better idea to use your setup and your implementation, because you're going to have potentially different versioning information that you want to track. So if you just try to use the one that's from PTC, that may work, but I think you have better success in starting from a template that you build from your implementation. So I think that's pretty much the overview. If we go back to the PowerPoint here, let me go ahead and click on this thing. Oh, of course, it's on the wrong screen. Let me flip that. The job monitor. And I think that's what I had. So Cassie, is there any questions or comments?
I'm not seeing any questions. Do you have that last slide that you could pull up? Perfect.
Sure. Yep.
So yeah, thank you so much for showing us how to do something in Windchill that will essentially make our lives a little bit easier. I do just want to touch on one more thing. The reason why EAC is more than just the average reseller is that we specialize in our services that we provide to our customers. One being the EAC Alliance Program, which is designed to provide ongoing technical support, business process consulting, and mentoring services on a monthly basis. There are multiple levels of support available to your organization depending on what your support needs are. Our experts are here to help those that don't have the time or expertise to maintain and support Windchill in-house. I may have had a question that came in. Maybe Todd, you can answer this. The question is, if validation has an error, how much information is provided to fix the error?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me see here. Let me escape out of this. And if I go back to, let's change something in one of these spreadsheets here. Let's go back to this WT part. And if I change something here to, let's get rid of, I'm just going to change this folder here or something. I'm going to change something. I can break this and we'll save this. And I'll just go back here to, the short answer is it gives you a fair amount of information and it's pretty specific. So we'll go back to import from the spreadsheet and we're going to say WT part. And if I just do a add only here. So in the errors and warnings down here, so it's going to say that it tells me exactly in the spreadsheet, gives me a warning, tells me what row it's on, and it says, hey, I'm going to ignore this part because this part's not valid based on the selected import action. And if I roll down here at the bottom, it should give me some information about not having correct path. But in general, it gives you pretty clear information about what's going on here. So it tells you what row, and then you can go back into your spreadsheet and say, well, okay, I see what's going on here because the part's not valid for that add. And the reason that this is complaining here is because these items already exist, and I selected the add only. Right? If I just said update only, then I could have changed a revision number or something like that, and I wouldn't have gotten that warning. But yeah, it's pretty clear, and then you'll have a difference there between a warning and an error, right? So warning will probably let you proceed with that, but an error is going to stop you in your tracks and force you to fix that error before it allows you to proceed.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so with that, I will let everyone have the rest of their day back. Again, there is a short survey that will pop up after the webinar ends, so please just take a moment to answer those. And I'll be sending that recording of the session in a following email this afternoon. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.